Hello. 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 Hello.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, you all are doing well. Thank you for continuing to come to the Majalis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Inshallah, we'll begin with Quran recitation by Brother Abbas. So please welcome him with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا إنا أعتدنا للكافرين سلاسلا وأغلالا وسعيرا إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجها كافورا عينا يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرون تفجيرا يوفون بنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا إنا نخاف من ربنا يوما عبوسا قمطريرا فوقاهم الله شر ذلك اليوم ولقاهم نظرة وسرورا وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا متكئين فيها على الأرائك لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا ودانية عليهم ظلالها وظللت قطوفها تذليلا ويطوف عليهم بآنية من فضة وأكواب كانت قوارير من فضة قدروها تقديرا ويسقون فيها كأسا كان مزاجها زنجبيلا عينا فيها تسمى سلسبيلا ويطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون إذا رأيتهم حسبتم لؤلؤا منثورا وإذا رأيت ثم رأيت نعيما وملكا كبيرا عاليهم ثياب سندس خضر واستبرق وحلوا أساور من فضة وسقاهم ربهم شرابا طهورا إن هذا كان لكم جزاء وكان سعيكم مشكورا إنا نحن نزلنا عليك القرآن تنزيلا فاصبر لحكم ربك ولا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا واذكر اسم ربك بكرة وأصيلا ومن الليل فاسجد له وسبحه ليلا طويلا إن هؤلاء يحبون عاجلة ويذرون وراءهم يوما ثقيلا نحن خلقناهم وشددنا أسرهم وإذا شئنا بدلنا أمثالهم تبديلا إن هذه تذكرة فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا وما تشاءون إلا أن يشاء الله إن الله كان عليما حكيما يدخل من يشاء في رحمته والظالمين أعد لهم عذابا أليما آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم.
I think
Ahsan. Thank you, Brother Abbas. Inshallah, we'll move on to the poetry recitation for today. Is Brother Mahdi Kifayati here? No. If not, I believe Urdu poetry today is by Brother Zorez. If he's not here, Brother Mahdi, if you can recite in the meantime. Bismillah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات
صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
گھر سے جب بحر سفر سید عالم نکلے گھر سے جب بحر سفر سید عالم نکلے سر جھکائے ہوئے بادیدہ پرنم نکلے خیش و فرزند پرے باندھ کے باغم نکلے رو کے فرمایا کہ اس شہر سے اب ہم نکلے رات سے گریہ زہرا کی صدا آتی ہے دیکھیں قسمت غم کس دشت میں لے جاتی ہے رخ کیا شہ نے سوئے قبر شہنشاہ انام بحر تسلیم جھکے متصل باب سلام اذن پا کر جو گئے قبر کے نزدیک امام عرض کی آیا ہے آج آخری رخصت کو غلام یہ مکان ہم سے اب شاہ زمن چھٹتا ہے آج حضرت کے نواسے سے وطن چھٹتا ہے چین سے سب ہیں گھروں میں مجھے ملتا نہیں چین سخت آفت میں ہے اب آپ کا یہ نور العین ٹکڑے دل ہوتا ہے جب مل کے حرم کرتے ہیں بین ننھے بچوں کو بھلا لے کے کدھر جائے حسین شہر میں چین نہ جنگل میں امان ملتی ہے دیکھیے قبر مسافر کو کہاں ملتی ہے یہ وہ دن ہیں کہ پرندے بھی نہیں چھوڑتے گھر مجھ کو درپیش ہے ان روزوں میں آفت کا سفر ساتھ بچوں کا ہے اے بادشاہ جن و بشر ہے کہیں قتل کا سامان کہیں لٹ جانے کا ڈر تنگ جینے سے ہوں پاس اپنے بلا لو نانا اپنی تربت میں نواسے کو چھپا لو نانا یہ بیاں کر کے جو تعویذ سے لپٹے سرور یوں ہی لی قبر کے تھرائی زریغ انور آئی تربت سے یہ آواز حبیب داور تیری غربت کے میں صدقے میرے مظلوم پسر کوئی سمجھا نہ میری گود کا پالا تجھ کو ہائے آدان مدینے سے نکالا تجھ کو کوئی سمجھا نہ میری گود کا پالا تجھ کو ہائے آدان مدینے سے نکالا تجھ کو گھر سے جب بہر سفر سید عالم نکلے اللہ لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین اللہم صلی علی محمد
Thank you, Brother Mehdi and Brother Zafar for reciting. It doesn't look like Brother Mehdi or Brother Zorez are here. So inshallah, we're going to move on to the main speech, inshallah. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, just quick introduction to Sayyid Zeeshum Ahmed. Sayyid Zeeshum Ahmed was born and raised here in the US, born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, spent some time during his high school years in San Antonio. When he departed for college, he went to UC Berkeley for about 1 year. After which he decided to pursue Hausa studies, and he has been there since, I believe, 2013. And right now he's studying usul, fiqh, and jurisprudence. I can't remember the third subject, but at the young age of 28, he has actually started his Dars-e-Khair studies as well. So we're blessed and honored to have you accept our invitation to come to Austin. And inshallah, without further ado, if we can welcome him to the minbar with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
again, just like yesterday, before we start, inshallah, we can recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of this majlis, as well as the departed souls of all the mu'mineen and mu'minat around the world. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين، روحي وأرواحنا لتراب مقدمه الفداء. Dear brothers and sisters, for the hastening of the reappearance of the Imam, please recite as-salawat. Allahumma salli ala. There are some things that the more apparent they are, the more obvious they are, they serve their purpose better. If you imagine, if you're on a battlefield, you see one of those old school movies where there's two, armies fighting each other, right? The way that they recognize each other is that, there's this big flag. There's a flag bearer holding up the flag, telling, okay, the army's still there. Obviously, even without the flag, the army would still be there. But the only way people really know from far away, or the rest of the army knows, is if they could see the flag. Similarly, maybe you can say our salawats are somehow our slogan, our flag, the thing that sort of announces our presence. So inshallah, for the sake that we are of the true companions of the Imam, and rather not only the true companions, but the ones who are present right when he first reappears, please recite a louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So last time, just, as a very brief recap of what we talked about yesterday, we talked about Iman, about having faith, about becoming a mu'min, right, rather than just being a Muslim, or rather than not having Iman or Islam at all. It's not just the thing of, it's not how faith is talked about in English, a leap of faith, of something despite not having enough proof or evidence. No, it's on top of having evidence, on top of having proof that what we view as correct is correct, there's also something called faith. There's also something called Iman. That's that heartfelt, true acknowledgement that what I'm saying is what I actually believe in. And when that happens, there's a revolution that happens. I'm not the same person anymore. I'm someone different because my priorities have shifted. What I see now has become different. Everything is different from me. So we want to continue on this topic. Want to see maybe some other aspects of what happens when I've decided, when I have reached this Iman, this becoming a mu'min. The first thing that we want to talk about, first thing that, sometimes comes to mind, is that there's a danger, there's something that, a strange sort of thing that happens when we learn about Islam. When we learn about Islam, either, from our parents or, from the center or somewhere, we have these various aspects of Islam that we learn about, right? We learn about, the theology, the aqaid, that God exists, about prophethood, about imamat, about qiyamah, day of resurrection, all these things, about beliefs, about things that we're saying, okay, these are true. These are the things that we believe in. And then to a greater extent, these are the things that almost define us as believers in Islam, because these are the things that we believe in. But then we have these other things too, right? We have things that we do, right? We have prayer, we have majalis, we have fasting, We have zakat, khums, all these things. Right? And then we have some ethics things too, ethical teachings, morals, how to have good akhlaq. That, okay, if you act like this, if you talk like this is a better way. This is how we should treat our parents. These are how we should treat our neighbors, how we should treat each other, our brothers, our sisters, all these things. But somehow, a strange thing starts to happen. That even though all of these things are supposed to be talking about Islam, in our minds, we might start to think of them as separate things. Where belief is one thing, and what we're doing is something else. And then sometimes we find it really, really difficult to connect the dots. What does it matter if I pray or not? If God is this absolute being that has no need for my prayer? Why does it matter that I'm sitting in the majlis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? What does that have to do with being Muslim, that a person who believes in Tawheed? So sometimes this religion that we have, maybe it's a factor of how we're taught, maybe it's a factor of our lack of understanding, but something happens. And when that happens, that leads to another thing, the thing that we mentioned yesterday, that it becomes easier and easier for other systems of values, of thoughts, of things to guide us in our lives, in other aspects of our lives. When there's a conflict, between God saying one thing and making money, all of a sudden, Islam might not be the most important thing to me anymore. And that's because we haven't connected the dots. We haven't said, okay, God saying, أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا, that transactions are allowed, halal, and having interest-based transaction, usury, that's haram. We haven't connected that to our belief in God Himself. That's the danger. So this is a little bit about what we want to talk about. How is it? What kind of iman is it? This faith, being a mu'min, what about it is it that connects these dots magically? That automatically, all these things seem to sort of fit in place. And without it, they remain separate things, divided, separate branches of knowledge, rather than being all one different aspects of the same thing. With that respect, I want to jump a little bit. I want to talk about one thing. That there's this doubt, and I think maybe I mentioned this yesterday too, that maybe sometimes we say, why can't I believe in Islam, believe in God, believe in the Prophet, believe in the Imam, believe there's a day of judgment? But all this action stuff, praying, fasting, okay, maybe I'll do that sometimes. Majlis, maybe a bit less. Hajj, maybe. Why do I have to do all this stuff? Why can't I just, be a good person? That's the thought that comes to mind. And we're encouraged in various ways to develop these kinds of thoughts. Don't want to go too much into that. Now, there's one way of answering this question is to sort of delve deeper into what we mean by good. Sort of go into the philosophy of ethics. What do morals mean? How do we derive good and bad? Can we define good and bad independent of God? If we can, how do we do that? How do we recognize what is good and bad? That's a full course that, is very worthy of going into. Perhaps, again, this is not the right setting for that. But just for one sort of glimpse of it, of how the actions that we do cannot necessarily be defined as good and bad without looking at the inner reality of the intention and the person. Right? For that, we'll turn to the Quran again. Again, as I said yesterday, there was an introduction to the Quran. Doesn't need to be repeated. But just because it's so important, we'll just say one word. This is an important book. Don't let it go. Don't waste it. And I'm saying that first and foremost to myself. Definitely first and foremost to myself. Don't waste this book. So in Surah Nahl, that's the, I believe, 16th Surah, verse number 106. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Man kafara billah min ba'di imanihi. The person who does kufr, disbelieves after having iman. Right? They had iman, then they disbelieved. At the end of the verse, it sort of tells what is the punishment of these kinds of people? What is the consequence for these kinds of people? The part that we're interested in is almost like a sentence that cuts in between, right? It says, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرَهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Except for the one who was forced, but his heart was still stable, tranquil with iman. Now, what is the Quran talking about? It's talking about Ammar ibn Yasir. Right? At the very beginning of Islam, Ammar ibn Yasir is one of the first to convert to Islam. One of the very first. Right? And despite all the pressures and tortures and things that are there, he's very steadfast. But one time, he's tortured very severely, extremely severely. And they tell him, look, just renounce Islam. Say that this is all a lie. Say that you don't really believe in this. And so he eventually, under the pressure of all this torture and punishment and pain, he says that. And so he comes to the Prophet afterwards and he's crying, he's weeping. He's like, the Prophet asked him what happened. He said, this is what happened. I renounced it. And this reverse is revealed. Look, this isn't about you. The punishment that's promised, it's not about you. We know what's happening in your heart. Right? That's the important stuff. There are times when the external reality of things might seem to point in one way, but the inner reality is something completely different. Now, why did we bring this example up? It's not to sort of highlight, everyone can seem like they're not a Muslim, but in reality they are a Muslim, or the opposite, or anything like that. No, we're not talking about that. Just trying to highlight this one point, that finding out what is good, what is bad, is intimately linked to the inner reality of what's inside of us. Right? The external things are important. There's no doubt about that. But the inner reality is even more important. But all of this is a side point. All of it. What we really want to go into is, why does this question come up even in the first place? Why do we even ask if we can be a good person without having to do these things? In some ways, it comes about because we've lacked a key point, a key understanding in our iman, in our faith, in this religion. And it's that this religion isn't sent for one aspect of our life. It's not sent to guide us to come to the center, to do majlis for the sake of doing majlis, to pray even for the sake of prayer. No, there's a purpose. And that purpose isn't for God, it's for you and me. If we haven't grasped that, then we'll continuously be looking for our benefit elsewhere. Because by nature, God created us in a way that we're always seeking our own benefit. And that's not a bad thing. We shouldn't come into Islam thinking, oh, Islam, if I believe in Islam, I have to give this up, I have to give that up. I'm just giving. No. Islam's not about that. Sure, you might be asked to give up things, but it's for your benefit, it's for my benefit. If I'm asked to give up my time to pray, that's not for God, that's for me. If I'm asked to come to the Majlis al-Azan, it's not for Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein doesn't need my majlis. God doesn't need my majlis. The family of the Imam doesn't need my majlis. No. It's for me. So in some ways, this is a really bad way of putting it, but I'm going to put it like that anyway, just to sort of hammer it home. Islam is a selfish religion. It's about me and me primarily. Everything is about me. And yes, I might get that ultimate me within a society where I have to give up a lot of my individual rights. That might come to be. And we'll talk, inshallah, more about this in one of the later nights. But even though Islam is saying that, it's not for someone else's benefit ultimately. It's for my benefit. And that's the beauty of Islam. You never face the question of, why should I give this up? Why should I give something of my own up for someone else's sake? Because in reality, everything we do in Islam is geared towards building our relationship with God, geared towards building ourselves up. And those two phrases, those are synonyms. Right? Again, maybe that's some topic left for another day. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this iman, if we look at it, right, and maybe it's a fault of mine, right? Because we're talking about it in a little bit of a strange way, right? We're talking about believing without really talking about what we're believing in, right? All the things that we're talking about, the effects of belief, about how belief can change you, all these things, we're talking about it without really getting into what we're actually believing in, right? And so some of it is a bit disconnected, doesn't really make sense. But inshallah, we'll go over those things in later nights. But before we get that, the reason that we treat it like this topic like this, and introduce it in this manner, is because we want to go after one of the ills that we face. We mentioned yesterday as well, of apathy, of why should we believe in the first place. So sometimes it's worthy, before we even get into what precisely we're believing in. We know in general, we know we're believing in God and all these things, right? We know what we were taught in our centers by our parents, all these things. In the general way, we know them, right? But sometimes we don't really realize what that actually means for me. I'll give an example. If I believe, I gave an example of the solar system yesterday, so I'll do it again today. If I believe that Pluto is a planet, or so I believe that Pluto isn't a planet, what practical difference does that make on my life? And sure, there might be some technical difference in the field of astronomy of how they classify, celestial bodies and all these things, and it might help in their classifications and all these things. Not to sort of put a knock on astronomy or anything like that. No, maybe it's needed in that particular field for that very particular reason. But me, I'm not an astronomer. I'm not really in that field at all. What does it matter? Why should I believe in one thing or believe in another thing, right? I could. There's no one doubting me. I could believe that Pluto is a planet. And maybe tomorrow I'll change my mind. Maybe Pluto isn't a planet. But how does that inform on my life? It doesn't. It means nothing, really, ultimately. Our problem is here. We treat our religion sometimes, we treat our religion like Pluto. That far off thing. Maybe we've never even seen a picture of it. Maybe we don't, sometimes if we even doubt if it really exists or not. It doesn't really have any bearing for us in our lives. So we treat religion like that, then of course this question will come up of why can't I just be a good person? Right? So this is what we want to look at. How is it, what is it that a mu'min is like such that this question just doesn't come up? What is it about it? So for that, there's another verse in the Quran. Right? So this verse every time I read it, every time that I look at it, it just, it's a different feeling. It's, there's some verses in the Quran, it's a personal thing, obviously, but some verses, they just, they shake you. For me, this is one of those verses. It's in Surah Anfal, the eighth surah, the second verse. Right? It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Starts with إنما المؤمنون. Certainly the mu'minun, the ones who have faith, right? The believers, right? They're only those who الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. When they remember God, their hearts tremble. And at first, you might think, okay, trembling with fear. You know, trembling, when we think of hearts trembling, we think about being scared, being afraid, right? But God isn't a scary thing in the way that, you know, a snake or a clown or something like that is scary, right? He's not like that. He's not jumping out of a closet saying boo, right? That's not God. So it's not scary in that meaning. It's not fear in that meaning. What is the meaning? I like to imagine it like this. If we pretend that for all my life, 30 years, 40 years, however long I lived underground, right? Anything that I've experienced, everything that I've experienced is all underground. It's caves, it's the walls really close to me, the ceiling right above me, maybe very, very limited light. That's all that I've experienced. Now, one day, somehow I managed to find my way above ground, somehow. And for the first time, I see something like the sky. For the first time, I see something unimaginable source of light, the stars, the moon, the sun, something that I just couldn't conceive of existing before. At that moment, there's an awareness. Sure, there might be a fear of the unknown and all those things, but there's even a higher thing, a realization that I'm really, really small in the grand picture of things. There's a lot beyond me. I'm almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And that's the realization that one has, a mu'min has, when they remember God. Because if you can conceive of it, God is the master of everything. If he turned his attention away from us for a moment, just a moment, we wouldn't crumble, we wouldn't do anything, we would cease to exist instantaneously. We wouldn't be there. Now, on the other hand, this same God that owns all of this, he sent this book, sent this prophet, sent this religion for me. Not for me as a factor of, oh, I'm one of the, instances of a human that lives in this world over the time of history. No, me individually. For me. When I stand up in prayer, I'm not talking to God as one of a group. Sure, I might be in a group in physical, context. I might be in Jama'at and I should be in Jama'at. But my connection with God, God is talking to me. And a mu'min, if he becomes aware of that, they tremble, right? Because that's on the other side, that's everything connected to you. And that's just mind-boggling. That shakes you. So this is the iman that's revolutionary. Right? Now I want to just, might be a side point, but just to sort of wrap this up a little bit better. When we talk about the Prophet coming, right? One of the words that are used usually is mab'uth, right? There's a ba'tha. And what that means is that he's taken and arisen within something. There's a revolution that's happening. You can almost use this word as a synonym or as a translation for revolution. There's some differences, but it's close to it. What is the Prophet doing first? What is his job? is to bring this religion. And so this revolution that the Prophet brings is something like this. We might first think of it as something simple. We might first think, oh yeah, I believe in Islam. That's it. But the more we think about it, the more aspects of our life it touches. We can't think of a single aspect of our life that it doesn't touch. Even the things that we don't even usually relate to Islam. Politics, economics, sociology, psychology, anything that you can imagine, anything that has to do with you, Islam has something to say. Because Islam is talking to you, saying, hey, you want to succeed? You want to become the best possible person you can ever be? This is what you have to do. So even if we were to look in a very utilitarian kind of perspective, right? Very, very selfish. What's best for me? Looking out for number one, right? If that's what we were doing, we would still believe in Islam. Right? That's what this kind of iman is. When we look at it with this perspective, things change. This kind of perspective can't coexist with something else leading our lives as well. So if we imagine, for example, various people that we have in history. Actually, let's skip history, maybe prehistory. First example that we can think of, Shaitan. Right? Shaitan definitely believes in God. There's no doubt about it. Right? He worships God. And from our rawayat, he worships God in a way that we can't even imagine worshiping. Right? Years-long prostration that, in a realm that I don't know what a year means even over there. Because this is this universe. So this is Shaitan. But we all know, Shaitan disobeys God. He doesn't bow down before Adam. Why? Because he's arrogant. He's like, I'm made from fire. Fire is definitely better than dirt. Fire is definitely better than earth. So how could I bow down before someone who's made from earth? Doesn't make sense. I'm out of here. Right? That's what Shaitan does. What's the problem? The problem has come where he sees his understanding, himself. Somehow he views himself above God in one way. Where what God is saying to do is leading him in most of his life, but when it becomes really important to him, something that really, really is near and dear to him, he's like, okay, God, over here you can't tell me what to do. Over here, that's my line. You've crossed it, I'm out. Who else does something like this? Something maybe closer to our minds. In the event of Karbala, there's another person who says, again, not the same as Shaitan, but a similar sort of dichotomy happens with him. Umar ibn Sa'd. Umar ibn Sa'd isn't someone who doesn't know the Ahlul Bayt. He knows them. He grew up close to Imam Hussein. He knows him by childhood, through childhood. He's not someone who's far away from Islam. No, he knows Islam. He knows his religion. He knows his choices are going to affect him negatively in the hereafter. But what does he say? That governance of Ray, that province of Ray, that's what I want. That's what's important to me. No matter what, I want that. I just can't let that go. That's what he says. And so even though he has Islam, even though he knows God is telling him to go in one direction, something else is guiding him for a different direction. There's that dichotomy there again. Third example. This example, the more we think about it, the more it's like takes you aback. There's a person in our history, Islamic history. who is related to the Prophet and Imam Ali through his mother's side. He's also related to them through marriage. He's called by the Prophet Sayyid Islam. He's one of the few people at the time of the death of the Prophet was inside the house of Imam Ali defending him. But this person, 20 years later, after the death of the Imam, is one of after the death of the Prophet, is one of the first people to rise up against Imam Ali. This is Zubair. The more you think about this example, this is in even more context. Zubair is one of the 4th or 5th people to convert to Islam, right? So he converted to Islam when it was the most difficult situation. He had to give up a lot, undergo torture, let go all of his belongings. Sometimes we forget how difficult that is. Oh, they lost everything, gave up everything for Islam. What happened there? Why did he turn against Imam Ali? One thing. He expected in return for all of the things that he gave up, he wanted just a governorship. Just one place to rule. Over time, he became to expect that that's what he wanted. And sure, we see that, in history it's recorded that, at the Battle of Jamal and the Battle of the Camel, he became, regretful for what he does. And maybe he would have even, truly gone against that. But whether that happened or not, that's again, maybe a debate for the history books. And inshallah, God is the one who is the ultimate judge. But why did that happen in the first place? It's again that dichotomy, where religion is somehow pulling all in one direction. But there's another system of values too. And that's our fault here. That we fail to accept religion as something total, as something that can guide us in all aspects of our lives. That when we accept it, the first thing that we should be asking is, what is our values? What is good? What is bad? What direction should I be going? And the more we ask that, the more precisely we ask that, the more we're aware of God in our day-to-day life. And the less this problem comes up. Because as I said, it's incompatible. True Iman, it just can't happen that someone is truly believing and something else is leading them in their life. No, it just doesn't happen. If I believe in God in a way that trembles my heart each time I remember him, and I'm remembering him constantly, then how could I ever choose something to go against him? It just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't. I wouldn't even imagine doing it. So that's the grandness of this faith. Sometimes it's valuable. It's important for us to realize what we're aiming for. Right? This isn't to say, oh, I look at myself and I'm like, you don't have it. You're done. Try something else. No, it's a process. It's a struggle. But this is what we're aiming for. We want to achieve this. We want to have faith like this. Again, to put it home, bring it home. The faith that we want is the faith that allows the ashab of the Imam to do what they did. The companions of the Imam to do what they did. The family of the Imam to do what they did. For the Imam to do what he did. We want to become like the Imam. That's our goal. Sometimes we have this strange picturing of the Imam. We're like, okay, the Imam is all the way up there somewhere, and we're all the way down here. And what we're aiming for is, something in between. No. If the Imam is our leader, that's what we're aiming for. That's what we want to be. Everything that the Imam does, that's what I want to do. That's what our perspective is. Otherwise, what kind of leader and follow, what kind of, relationship is that? So we look at the event of Karbala. This is one of the secrets and the, not secret in the meaning of, something not known. This is something known. But a secret in the meaning of like the heart of it. What's at the heart of commemorating Muharram time and time again, not just the event of Karbala, not just in the days of Muharram, but also whenever we have a chance, whenever we feel sad, whenever we remember Imam Hussein. Why? It's because this event has everything for us. You want to look at anything, any example, any role model, any aspect of life you can imagine, you'll find something in Karbala to remind ourselves, to lead us in that aspect of our life as well. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني زيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Dear brothers and sisters, today the caravan of Imam Hussein is entering Karbala. They're entering these hot sands. And it's narrated that Imam Hussein, when he comes here, he feels something different about this land. There's something different here. And so he asks, what is the name of this land? Where are we? And so he's told one name after another, Nahrawan, other names. He keeps on asking, no, there's a different name. What is it? It's narrated that they got some old person who was there, who knew the sort of traditional names really well. And he said, this is Karbala. The Imam says, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-karbi wal-bala. Oh God, I seek protection from misery and calamity. At this moment, I wonder, is Imam Hussein thinking of his last night in Medina? On the last night of Medina, Imam Hussein went to the grave of his grandfather, the Prophet. And he says, Ya Jadda, Ya Rasulullah, Inna al-qawm farraqu bayni wa baynik. Oh Allah, oh Rasulullah, oh the Prophet, oh my grandfather. These people, they're separating me and you. They're dividing us, they're pushing us apart. What can I say, Ya Rasulullah? I can't give you the comfort of saying that these people that your grandson is talking about is this conquering army that took over after your death. I can't give you the comfort of saying that these aren't the Muslimin, that these aren't your ummah. No. This is the ummah of the Prophet. How disappointed would the Prophet be? There's another person, when I think of disappointment, there's a line that strikes the mind. There's a line in Dua Nudbal when we're talking to our Imam, the Imam of our time, the one that we are sending letters to. There's a line there. It says, عزيزا علي أن أبكيك ويغضلك الورى. It's difficult on me, oh my Imam. It's difficult that I weep for you, but others are disappointing you. But when I read this line, I think, maybe I read it wrong. Maybe I'm the one disappointing the Imam. Maybe it's the other people who are weeping for him, the true followers. And maybe I'm the one disappointing. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, at the grave of his grandfather, it's narrated that perhaps he fell unconscious. And in the dream, he saw the Prophet saying, Ya Hussein, nahnu mushtaquna ilayk. We're waiting for you. We're anxiously waiting for you. And so I wonder at this moment when Imam Hussein is entering Karbala, is it this line that's giving him comfort? That he knows that his grandfather is waiting for him. He knows that his grandfather is anxiously waiting for him. And so the Imam tells Ali Akbar, Hazrat Abbas, bring down the tents. Settle in the women and the children. This is where we're going to be buried. This is where our blood is going to be spilled. This is where our family is going to be taken into captivity. But I wonder, Imam Hussein, if out of the corner of your eye, if you saw Hazrat Zainab coming off her camel, and if you did, if you noticed who helped her off that camel, was it Hazrat Abbas? Was it Ali al-Akbar? It's my Imam. In 8 days, in 10 days, when Hazrat Zainab wants to come back on that camel to leave this land, who will she have? The Ashab aren't even there. Who is there to protect Zainab? Now there's a curious event that happens on the night of Ashura. Everyone on that night, it seems like they're doing their own thing, their own preparation for the next day. And in one tent is Imam Hussein. And Hazrat Zainab comes to that tent. And it's narrated that Imam Hussein is sharpening his sword. And as he's sharpening his sword, it's narrated that he says this one line, this one poem. It says, Ya Dahur, uffan lak min Khalil. Oh time, what an unfaithful friend, what a bad companion you've been, that it's come to this state. Hazrat Zainab hearing this, there's a fear, a terror comes into her heart, and she says, Oh my Imam, oh my brother, when you said this line, something came to my mind. I remember the moments of my father, of our father, Imam Ali, when he was betrayed and struck on the head. I'm remembering the moments of our brother, Imam Hassan, when his companions ranked the player rug underneath him. Oh Hussein, have you tested your companions? Are you sure they're going to be with us tomorrow? Now at that time there was a companion walking by the tents. Perhaps it was Habib, maybe it was Zuhair. But he overheard this line from Hazrat Zainab. He wasn't offended. He thought to himself, what a companion, what a sorry state we're in that this has come to it, that Aqila ibn Hashim is asking this. He strikes himself and he rushes to the other companions. And he tells them, this is what's in Zainab's heart. She's doubting us. She doesn't know if we're going to be with her tomorrow. We have to do something. And so the companions gather and they come to the tent of the women and they say to them, tomorrow not a blood of Bani Hashim is going to be spilt while we remain. We will not let that happen. We are true companions. And so looking at this, from our perspective, we pray that we can be amongst those companions. But O Imam Hussein, even these companions did not remain till the next day. And when Hazrat Zainab is going on her camel to leave this land, there's no protection, there's no mahram to help her up. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that these tears, this azah, this speech, whatever khair is in it, that He gives us its reward many times over. And if anything was said that was displeasing, that was wrong, that was incorrect, it's removed from our hearts and from our minds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when we remember these companions of the Imam, when we remember the companions of Imam Hussein, we don't take it as a story. We don't take it like a fairy tale. We take it for a role model, as an example, what we aspire to be. That's who we want to be with our Imam. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we don't leave these majalis azah as we entered them, that it changes us, it transforms us, that we become the companions of the Imam. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
Awesome. Inshallah, we'll go outside for Latmiya, followed by Salat.
ये मातों सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे, ये मातों सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे, ये फर्श अज़ाए सिबत नबी ता महशर बिछा रहे, ये मातम सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे, ये मातम सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे, ये मातम सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे। कितनी ही उठे जुल्मत की घटा, कितनी ही उठे जुल्मत की घटा, ओ कितनी ही तारीख फिजा, ओ कितनी ही तारीख फिजा, बुझने नहीं पाए शौमे अज़ा, नहीं पाए शौमे अज़ा, कितने ही उठे तूफान मगर रोशन ये दिया रहे, ये मातम सदा रहे और इससे सिवा रहे, ایک نسل ہٹے ایک نسل بڑھے ایک نسل ہٹے ایک نسل بڑھے ایک شمع بجھے ایک شمع جلے ایک شمع بجھے ایک شمع جلے شبیر کا ماتم ہوتا رہے نسلن بعد نسلن یوں ہی جاری سلسلہ رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے غم خار شہے ابرار ہیں ہم غم خار شہے ابرار باطل کے لیے تلوار ہے ہم باطل کے لیے تلوار تاریخ کا وہ کردار ہے ہم مر سکتے ہیں مٹ سکتے نہیں ذہنوں میں ذرا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے ہم پلتے رہے طوفانوں ہم پلتے رہے طوفانوں بہتے رہے خون کی دھاروں میں بہتے رہے خون کی دھاروں میں چنوائے گئے دیواروں میں خود مٹ گئے بانی ظلم مگر ہم اہل عطا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے سوکھے ہوئے لب حل من کی صدا سوکھے ہوئے لب حل کی صدا تاریخ بھلا سکتی ہے بھلا تاریخ بھلا سکتی ہے بھلا کیا عالم غربت ہے بخدا ہے کون سے تم سے کر اتنے راضی برتا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے یہ ماتم سدا رہے اور اس سے سوا رہے یا حسین 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 واویلا حسین واویلا واویلا حسین واویلا everyone واویلا حسین واویلا واویلا حسین واویلا حسین سینه ها دارالعزا شد سینه ها دارالعزا شد خیمه ماتم به پا شد خیمه ماتم به پا شد غرق خون شد دلم ای یار زینب کربلایی شدی سالار زینب غرق خون شد دلم ای یار زینب کربلایی شدی سالار زینب واویلا حسین واویلا واویلا حسین واویلا واویلا آتش افتاده به جانم این زمین برده امانم آتش افتاده به جانم این زمین برده امانم آمدی میهمانی در بیابان میزبانت شدند این نیزه داران
آمدی میهمانی در بیابانی فانت شدن این میزدان وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا من و این اشک جاری من و این اشک جاری مردم از دل بیقراری مردم از دل بیقراری ترسم اینجا تو را پر پر ببینم سر جدا در بر مادر ببینم ترسم اینجا تو را پر پر ببینم سر جدا در بر مادر ببینم وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا کوچه گردی پناهم نیم شب دلشوره دارم کوچه گردی بی پناهم نیم شب دلشوره دارم از غم بی کسی قدم شکسته نام تو بر لب خشکم نشسته از غم بی کسی قدم شکسته نام تو بر لب خشکم نشسته وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا طعم غربت را چشیدم از کسی خیری ندیدم طعم غربت را چشیدم از کسی خیری ندیدم بین مردم طرفداری ندارم غیر تو ببین یاری ندارم بین مردم طرفداری ندارم غیر تو ببین یاری ندارم وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا پدر کینه دارم مغز تو در سینه دارم پدر کینه دارم مغز تو در سینه دارم بیان یک به یک کس انتظارم بس جان علم کار تو دارم بیان یک به یک کس انتظارم بس جان علم کار تو دارم وا ویلا حسین وا ویلا
لتعجيل فرج طاحة العصر والزمان صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين ويا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين وعزي زينب بالنحيب والدموع هيا أقيم العزاءات الشموع وعزي زينب بالنحيب والدموع هيا أقيم العزاءات الشموع بلسمي جرحا غدا بين الضلوع وعزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين ويا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين وزينب بعد العباس سبيا والحسين في أرض الغادرية زينب بعد العباس سبيا والحسين في أرض الغادرية دون غسل أو تكفين يا للرازية وعزي زينب بالبكاء والأنين والآنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين وكيف أنسى ربة القدر المصون أينما تمضي فللأسر تكون وكيف أنسى ربة القدر المصون أينما تمضي فللأسر تكون زينب سكينة رباب أم كلثوم عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين ورادعا كان داخل القباء جاء الحسين يطلب له الماء ورادعا كان داخل القباء جاء الحسين يطلب له الماء دون بارد المعين سوقه الدماء عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين بالبكاء والآنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين ركب الصبايا عاد إلى الطفوف ينعي شهيدا قضى بين الألوف ركب الصبايا عاد إلى الطفوف ينعي شهيدا قضى بين الألوف ظلما ضاميا ذاك مر الخطوف عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين يا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين رملة تبكي فتاها نجل الحسن ليلى تندوب الأكبر دون كفان رملة تبكي فتاها نجل الحسن ليلى تندوب الأكبر دون كفان زينب عند العباس تشتكي الميحان عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين يا دمعة الحزن ويا دمعة الحزن في مر السنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين عزي زينب بالبكاء والآنين
كربلا 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 जाने वाले करबला के करबला ले चल मुझे जाने वाले करबला के करबला ले जाने वाले करबला के करबला ले चल मुझे जाने वाले करबला के करबला ले चल चल मुझे जाने वाले करबला के है जहाँ गंगे शहीदा है जहाँ नहरे फुरात है जहाँ गंगे शहीदा है जहाँ
چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے جس جگہ جاگی تھی قسمت پھر کی وہ دیکھوں گا میں جس جگہ جاگی تھی قسمت پھر کی وہ دیکھوں گا میں آسیوں پر کیسے ہوتی ہے عطانے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے اس قدر نادار ہوں کہ سفر کچھ بھی نہیں اس قدر نادار ہوں تیرے سفر کچھ بھی نہیں دوش پر اپنی بٹھا کر اے حوالے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے اس جگہ بات کے بعد قلم ہو کر گرے جس جگہ بات کے بعد قلم ہو کر گرے اس جگہ میں بھی کروں ماتم ذرا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے دل لج کر آ گیا پرچی میں اکبر کا جہاں دل لج کر آ گیا پرچی میں اکبر کا جہاں دل وہاں میں بھی کروں اپنا فدا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے جل گئے شام غریبا میں جہاں پہلے تمام جل گئے شام غریبا میں جہاں پہلے جمال اس جگہ منا ہر ایک جھولا جلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے آئے وہ مقتل جہاں بالی سکینہ رات میں آئے وہ مقتل جہاں بالی سکینہ رات میں ڈھونڈتی پھرتی تھی سینہ باپ ڈالے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جانے والے جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے جاؤ صحیح 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 السلام عليكم يا رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا